The total package here comes to roughly $6 trillion, $2 trillion direct assistance, roughly $4 trillion in Federal Reserve lending power. Again, it will be the largest Main Street financial package in the history of the United States. Liquidity and cash for families, small business, individuals, unemployed to keep this thing going. We're heading for a rough period, but it's only going to be weeks, we think. Weeks, months, not going to be years, that's for sure. And hopefully pave the way for continued economic recovery after this crisis.
Team, just a quick correction. I think I said $8 trillion in the last hour, but it is $6 trillion total. Still a lot of money. Still quite a pretty penny. Producer Mark, do we think we could fit $6 trillion in your new apartment if we put it in cash? I don't even know.
Probably not. Maybe if it was in big bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, it's a lot of money. I remember the one time in my life that I held, and it wasn't my money, I held bags with very large sums of U.S. cash in them for professional reasons. And I just remember thinking, wow, money's heavy. Money gets heavy pretty fast. So $6 trillion would be a lot of cash. That much is for sure. And that's what we're facing right now because we are friends, Americans, countrymen. We are in a tough spot right now. There is no question. And as I go to air, we have not yet seen the passage of this massive, the largest spending bill in history. I mean, this is in dollar figures, the biggest act of Congress of all time. I mean, this will be the biggest congressional action ever. So that puts it into perspective pretty quickly. I mean, I remember the sense of the sky is falling back in the financial crisis of 2008. And now we realize, wow, that was actually not that bad. You know, we were able to deal with that one pretty quickly. The bounce back came relatively fast. So this is going to be, as we all know, the stakes are higher, and this is a more challenging situation. And, you know, sure enough, this is the test. We all knew it would come. It comes with every presidency, right? This is the test of the Trump presidency right now. And I think the president so far is doing a good job. I cannot say it is perfect. There are areas of criticism that are legitimate, but I think the president is overall, I mean, I certainly put myself in that 60% that says that he has been handling this well. And I am pleased with the approach that the White House has taken so far. I am not pleased with the bull that the Democrats, today's a day when I kind of wish I could drop some salty language on the air, but I can't. I'm not happy with the Nancy Pelosi shenanigans, the malarkey of Pelosi. That is for sure. And these other Democrats who are going along with her. Here's what we know about what this bill that supposedly is agreed upon, and so it's only a matter of time before they actually, before this actually gets dispersed. It's $130 billion for hospitals, $150 billion for state and local government, $350 billion for small businesses, 4 months of unemployment insurance, $1,200 for adults, and $500 per child in direct cash payments. Now, the payroll tax holiday, do we call it a holiday? I mean, removing the payroll tax for a period of time, I think it's only going for employers and not for individuals. That's bad. They should have had it. That just means, anyway, that doesn't work. You got to do it for both, or else the employer is just going to end up taking it out of the individual's pay. They won't take it out of their paycheck in the same way, but they pass on this cost to their employees. So, you won't get the benefit for the being an employee that you would if they had eliminated at both ends. I actually did that in reverse. At least I didn't think that. What was the number again? That MSNBC host and Brian Williams. Gosh, Bloomberg spent $500 million. He could give $1 million to every American. That's amazing. Nope. I do think it's also fair to ask. Bloomberg will end up having spent almost $1 billion on his campaign, and he has, after promising to employ people who work in the campaign until the fall, even if it doesn't, the campaign obviously is over now. They're not doing that. He's not keeping his word. That seems kind of gross. I also think it's worth noting that the Bloomberg camp, Bloomberg himself could really step up here and help out a lot of people in a lot of ways. I'm not saying he hasn't. I might have missed something, but I haven't seen it yet. You're going to spend $500 million plus on your vanity president. Look, he's allowed to do what he wants to do. I'm not saying that this is a compulsory thing, but if I were worth $60 billion right now, I would just be thinking, I would be spending as much time as I had waking hours. How do I help people that are getting hurt by this right now? What can I do? Because there's a lot. When you're worth billions and billions of dollars, there's a lot you can do to help out your community, a lot you can do to assist. Instead, Bloomberg News, for example, feels more and more like the propaganda wing of the Chinese Communist Party, which is a complete disgrace. I'll talk more about China later on, but Bloomberg is particularly bad in its coverage of all this stuff. But okay, so I told you what's in the bill, and there's a lot, and we don't, we got to read it to know what's in it, the whole thing. You know how journalists tell you 1,000 times a day that the president lies 1,000 times a day? This has become it's really a tick. It's a compulsion. Journalists will say this when they have nothing else to say. Just Trump lies. Trump lies. And they run all these fact checks about how Trump's lied like 15,000 times or something. And then I look at them and fact check after fact check. It's Trump saying, I'm like the greatest or I'm the best. Not true. Trump is lying. He's not the best. It's like, are you little idiot children in the media? Oh, the answer is yes, they are. But Pelosi, we all know what happened here. And I was talking about this in the last hour. Pelosi is supposed to be the strategic genius. We all know what's happening. And she's not a strategic genius. In fact, she's just at the point now where I think she's gotten sloppy because she knows the media. And some of you are like, sloppy like Chardonnay? No, I mean sloppy. Well, I mean sloppy like the media covers for her so quickly and so completely that she doesn't have to. She doesn't get held responsible for her mistakes, for her overreach, for the things that she does. And so this is one of those moments where she would have been better off if the media wasn't completely a bunch of lapdogs for her. No offense, Tallulah. You're great. She's the French bulldog right now in the apartment with me is totally asleep because she needs at least 14 hours of sleep a day, apparently. I exist to feed her and to lift her up onto things that she wants to sleep on that require too much effort for her. That is why this human being exists. But the media are lapdogs for Nancy Pelosi, and that wasn't in her favor this time around because she went too far. And now she's trying to claim. She claimed this on TV. I wonder how many fact checks will be run on this. I wonder how many journos will express their outrage at the brazenness. I mean, there's lying and then there's lying. I mean, this is some next level stuff. Play clip 2.
Well, I'm not going to negotiate on TV, but I want to have a unanimous consent. I want us to be able to go forward, it's not a bill I would have written in terms of some things that relate to family medical leave, that relate to worker protections, that ruling on worker protections, but that can be done administratively. We can find other ways. Not enough money for elections, et cetera, at this time. Everything we're suggesting just relates to COVID-19. It's not about making law for the future. It's about COVID, well, except fighting COVID-19 is for the future, but I mean, it's not changing policy except as it applies here. So again, many of the provisions in there have been greatly improved because of negotiation.
Let me ask you about that.
Everything in that bill, Nancy, you heard her. Everything in that bill, she claims, relates to COVID-19. Her version of the bill, the 1,192-page bill that she showed up with at the last minute, and Chuck Schumer snapped to attention with the rest of the Senate Democrats and said, nope, no cloture vote, no movement on this bill. We're going to waste more time. People are rightly very concerned about paying their bills, buying their groceries. No money in the bank. What do you do when there's no money in the bank? People would say, oh, I'll use your credit card. What if you don't have a credit card? You think you're going to get one right now? That might be a bit of a challenge. You never had one before. What if you don't have a checking account? What if you're somebody who just lives from cash paycheck to cash paycheck, as many Americans do? What exactly are they offering you? What is going on here? Why are we waiting? Why the delay? Pelosi says it's all COVID-19 related. That would mean you'd have to think that carbon emissions from an airline industry that's about to go bankrupt. That's about COVID-19, making sure that they're offsetting their carbon emissions, that corporate diversity on boards or diversity on corporate boards is about COVID-19, same-day voting, ballot harvesting, mail-in voting, all these different, just the wish list of liberal stuff. And then there's also the reporting that I don't think we'll ever get fully, I don't think we'll ever hear the full scope of these negotiations, but that one of the snags here was that they wanted small business funding. This was reported, small business funding for Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has to be part of this, has to be saved by the government, which just goes to show you that, I mean, the way that the Democratic Party treats Planned Parenthood, it's as though it's a branch of the Planned Parenthood is a branch of the government as established in the Constitution. I mean, they're delusional about not just the right to abortion existing in the Constitution, but that there's some edifice of the abortion industry that is essential to our republic. I mean, they really do think this. They think that it's a symbol, that Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby are a symbol of liberation, women's equality, freedom, all these different. It's just obtuse and it's disgusting. But here we are, seeing exactly where their priorities lie at this point in time. I would also note that Planned Parenthood I think in Pennsylvania at this point, it might be happening in other places too. They always tell you when they catch a little too much heat and people say, wait a second, will Planned Parenthood really do an abortion at 7 or 8 months? Will they really do that? Whenever they catch too much heat because the public actually figures out what's going on, they like to fall back on this claim that abortion is only 3% of what we do. Only 3%. And then we would say, well, if they'd cut out that 3%, they should be, everyone thinks that women should get mammograms and be funded for actual health care. So there's no problem there. The 3% is the problem, politically speaking, morally, ethically speaking. So they've decided, do you know what the only service is that Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania is going to be offering during this shutdown? The only service, not cancer screenings, which they refer people out for this stuff anyway, but not, STD screening or anything that is health related. None of that. No. The only service they're going to continue to do is abortion. And they are being declared, because they're a medical facility, they are claiming the exemption that other businesses have. So they're getting loans as a small business, that's what the Democrats want. They want Planned Parenthood to get federal dollars to make sure that they keep their staff and keep everything going. And they're getting an exemption as a healthcare provider when they're not going to be providing healthcare. They're only going to be providing abortions. I know that we have a lot of things to focus on right now, but this is the decrepit and fetid soul of the Democratic Party on display for you, and they'll never be able to justify this. They'll never be able to run for it, and at some point in the future, and I've said it many times before, the two great moral stains on this country's history, the two great moral stains on this nation, and that we're still the greatest nation in the history of the world, and I love America as much as anybody. But our two great stains will be slavery and then abortion. That is reality. But I know we have to focus more on what this bill is going to do and who it's going to help and who it's not going to help. So let me get before I dive into that, because I have very big concerns. Do you think that Pelosi is going to be hectored by journalists over this? Do you think that they're going to chase her all around saying, wait, it's all about how are windmills and solar panels related to COVID-19? Coronavirus. How is that? That's what you claimed. And if it's all about coronavirus, why did you wait until the last minute to do this? We all know the answer. She's a liar. Nancy Pelosi's a liar. She's lying on a big issue when people are in pain. This isn't a Trump lie about how Trump steaks were the best steaks I've ever had. I mean, maybe they were. Who knows? I never tried one. Who cares? This is a big lie. This is a lie that matters. You think she'll get anybody calling her out on this one? Think, the brave journalists, Cooper and Tapper and I don't know who else. I mean, MSNBC, do they even have journalists? Do they even call themselves journalists over there anymore? I don't know what they consider themselves. Think they're going to push her on this one? No, of course not. She's doing the left's bidding, and they all know it. So she'll just get a total pass. These people are disgraced. I mean, the American corporate media needs to be razed to the ground and built anew with an entirely different ethos, with an entirely different approach. But that's a conversation that we'll have to wait until we've saved the country and everything's okay. We'll get back to it at some point, I promise.
After days of intense discussions, the Senate has reached a bipartisan agreement on a historic relief package for this pandemic. It will rush new resources onto the front lines of our nation's healthcare fight, and it will inject trillions of dollars of cash into the economy as fast as possible to help American workers, families, small businesses, and industries make it through this disruption and emerge on the other side ready to soar. The Bipartisan CARES Act will squarely address each of the four big priorities that I laid out in my legislation at the beginning of the process about a week ago. It will rush financial assistance to Americans through direct checks to households from the middle class on down, and through a significant and creative expansion of unemployment insurance during this emergency. It will deliver historic relief to Main Street America through hundreds of billions of dollars in emergency loans so more small businesses can survive this and keep paying their workers. It will help secure our economic foundations and stabilize key national industries to prevent as many layoffs as possible.
There's going to be a lot of good that this does, at least in the short term. And people, this is very interesting because we see here, the government is the cause of, the government has declared, I shouldn't say the cause is the virus, but the government has declared the shutdown. So we're obeying a government mandate to not work, to not make money, to not do what we would normally do. So it is a government responsibility to provide for people while that's going on, right? That's the same way, if the government detained you, it's the government's responsibility to feed you and take care of your medical care and everything else. They're going to detain you and say, sorry, you're on your own now. So the government has told us to self-quarantine, which is in effect a mass detention for a good reason, but they also need to help people keep the lights on and pay their bills in the meantime. It's the right thing, but let's also remember it's a short-term thing. The clock is ticking in every respect right now. We do not have, and I think this is the thinking on this issue that I believe is dangerous. We do not have an open-ended timeline in shutdown, and we do not have an unending checkbook with which we can deal with all of this. We were already, and this is why the trillions and trillions of dollars, and by the way, you look at the Obama administration and what was spent, not just in the rescue from the financial crisis, but just what was spent for all 8 years. You had more added to the national debt than I believe was added before it by I don't want to say something that's numerically untrue, but it was certainly the most expensive presidency in the history of the country. That's for sure. In terms of overall dollars, more dollars spent for the 8 years of the Obama administration than any other comparable period of time. You might say, well, what about World War II if we adjust for inflation? There's some, but they spent a lot of money under the Obama administration. A lot of money, a lot. And we spent too much money in the Bush administration and going back and back and back. And now the debt is out of control. The debt matters, folks. We need to keep that in mind because we could do a final straw situation here if we keep this check writing on for too long.
And most importantly, the federal government will pay your salary, your full salary, for now 4 months. We had asked for 4 months, and 4 months looks like what we're going to get when we come to this agreement. It will mean two things. Most of all, it will put money into the hands of those who need it so much because they've lost their jobs, as I said, through no fault of their own. So that is vitally important, and that will pump money into the economy probably in a better way than anything else could do it.
All right. Let's assume that what they're doing right now, and there's a lot of ways that they could probably be better about this, and I think that the limits from their 2018 tax return, the limits on this, if it takes too long to get people the money, that's a problem. So this has to be now. They've got to get these checks out this week, which is why the delay is inexcusable from Pelosi and Schumer, the partisan bull that they pulled here. And we all know what they did. And it was too obvious. It was too clear even for the media to cover for Pelosi. What does that tell you? They wanted to. The New York Times was, the Democrats shut down the bill. It's Republicans' fault. They tried. They did make, it's not like they were too ethical for this, but they're like, okay, even our readers are like, that's kind of, come on, guys. There are limits. There are, even for crazy libs, there are limits for what they're willing to believe from their own left-wing news organizations. So the dollar amounts are, that's an issue. I don't mean just, is it enough money for people? It depends on where you are. If you're living right now, I mean, well, we've got a fantastic station out in Omaha, KFAB. If you're living in Omaha, you are going to be able to get a lot further on that $1,200 than you would listening out in Los Angeles on KEIB, right? If you're living in, the Albany area, WGY, you're probably going to have higher expenses than if you're living out in Fort Wayne, Indiana on WOWO, listening on WOWO. So money doesn't go the same in terms of what your expenses are around the country, but they're not adjusting it state by state. They're just saying, look, this is the check that we're sending, and here's what we're going to do. And the limits on this, I mean, if you made over $99,000 2 years ago, there are a lot of assumptions baked into that. What if you've started a small business and you're 2 years into it? Anyway, it's clearly imperfect. So there's a lot of ways you can pull it apart, and everyone knows that. I'm not even sure how helpful it is because, okay, well, now here's where we are, and there probably will be another round. There'll be another series of bailout efforts and measures because right now the consensus seems to be lockdown as long as we need. That's what's important. And anyone who says otherwise and is willing to accept any elevated risk whatsoever of this virus spreading. And remember, elevated risk could just be for people who aren't on lockdown and leave and work. This is what some have been suggesting. Maybe if you are out of a high risk cohort and you want to go into the office or you want to be more, you want to open up. But it's going to be very tricky because, for the service industry, for example, you need people to be able to congregate. So I understand that. That becomes very tricky. How do you draw those lines and what are you going to do? But it's very likely that there's going to be another round of check writing from the federal government. And to people who say that's not a problem and that can't result in anything really bad, I would just respond with, okay, why doesn't the government? I mean, just do this as a thought experiment. Why does the government limit it to $1,200, a person and $500 a kid? Why not just write everyone a check for $50,000? I mean, you could say $1 million, but I mean, I guess that's just everybody would realize how catastrophic that is, right? Just because the number's so high that what is a dollar worth at that point? Okay, why not write everyone a check for maybe $50,000? Let's say, why not write everyone a check for $5,000? $5,000 in the federal government right now. It's not that much more than what they're already doing. Why not $5,000? Well, you realize, hold on a second, what ends up happening to the dollar and what happens to the treasury bonds and to the role of the dollar as a reserve currency. There are still these economic realities that exist. There are still these economic pressures that are out there, and they don't go away just because we're in the midst of a pandemic. They won't change. They won't shift just because we're in really rough shape right now. Inflation doesn't care about a virus, right? The collapse of the dollar doesn't care about the human suffering that's going on before or after the collapse. And if that's not a concern, then I do need someone to explain, why are we being so stingy? Why not just write a check for $10,000 to everybody? They're already saying they're writing for couples. It'll be what, $2,400? Why not make it $10,000? Really help people out. Give them a few months, to chill. Don't worry about it, right? Well, because the numbers matter. The numbers matter because we have an economy that is built on, at some level, an understanding of the government's ability to back up its obligations. And this is true all over the world, too, that people think the United States government is good for its obligations. If that perception dramatically changes, we are in for a seismic shift in the wealth and influence of this country. And that's what a lot of us are trying to avoid. That is what people are looking at now and saying, hold on a minute. What are we going to do here if in 2 or 3 months we still haven't, and I want to talk about what the longer term plan is, and we still haven't beaten this. The economy's still largely shut down. Just going to keep writing checks? When does that worry people? And I understand that there are some folks right now. This is gaining a lot of stay home. It doesn't matter. No one cares about the economy. No one cares about the stock market. It's just all, this is what you're hearing from people who think that they're smart and wise. Okay. Then why not just have a lock? Why not just accept we'll be in quarantine till the end of the year? Everybody somehow understands that quarantine like this to the end of the year would be catastrophic. And with that financial catastrophe would come untold misery, lack of access to routine medical care, lack of access to food. Everyone understands that. So if we know, and maybe some people don't, but they're just truly out of their minds. Although there are people like that. They're saying we could just stay home. You have to run the experiment through in your head. Okay, then why not just let everyone stay home all the time? We can just stay like this. The government can just keep writing checks. The government can just do whatever it wants. There are pressures here from the numbers. That's why. There are interest rates. There are bondholders. There are obligations all across our enormously complicated financial system. And if you just say, well, the government's going to just write checks for everybody and the amounts don't matter and the time duration doesn't matter, then you're begging for the absolute collapse of the American economy. That's what you're really waiting for. It's going to happen, right? We understand that, I hope. There are people right now who don't. And the moment you bring this up, they say, you just want grandma to die. That's what they're yelling at you, which is a horrible, insidious, and dumb thing to say to a person that's trying to think critically and honestly about how best to tackle this nightmare that the country's in. But it's gonna get scary with the spending. It's gonna get scary. That's because people just they don't want to believe, they don't want to accept, and they don't want to make the hard decisions now about what is tolerable risk to the economy versus tolerable acceleration of risk from the growth in risk for the virus in certain parts of the country, certain populations at certain times. No one seems to be able to answer that or wants to answer that right now. And if you try, you get yelled at, which is not good.
But to everyone who has left New York over the last few days, because of the rate of the number of cases, you may have been exposed before you left New York. And I think, like Governor DeSantis has put out today, everybody who was in New York should be self-quarantining for the next 14 days to ensure that the virus doesn't spread to others, no matter where they have gone, whether it's Florida, North Carolina, or out to far reaches of Long Island. We are starting to see new cases across Long Island that suggest people have left the city.
Yep. That's what's going on. People moving around spreads this. So those who, ran for the country house, the cabin, the chateau, the, relatives' home, whatever it may be, might have accidentally brought this into even more areas, which could stretch public health systems even more. This is very concerning. You have hospital systems now. Remember, New York is overwhelmed, will be overwhelmed based on the numbers that they're projecting the hospital system here, and we have huge hospitals. They're very advanced, and they, as hospitals go, are well funded. I mean, I know something about the hospital system here. And there are other parts of the country where there is far lesser access to hospitals at all. Now, there's also less population density. So clearly, you look at these things and try to assess what the risks are and where there's cause for real concern versus where we can manage things. But you're going to see the spread of this in a whole bunch of places all over the country that you hadn't really anticipated there being spread. And this is why having a system in place, Cuomo was talking this morning about moving effectively focusing in federal resources for the ventilators and the personal protective equipment in one place, which right now would be New York, with the understanding that as New York brings down the curve, you can then move it to the next place, which could be, might be in California, might be in Florida, might be in Louisiana, might be in Texas. We got to just see where it is. And that's going to be logistically a challenge, but it is one way of dealing with this. If you can move 15,000, 20,000 ventilators, if you can surge that to where it's needed quickly enough, that may be this. I'm just telling you what the governor of New York was offering up today, a mobile surge capacity for dealing with this that will have to happen in many parts of the country, or they'll have to figure something else out, because you are going to see smaller hospital systems are already reporting in that they're overwhelmed in places that you would not expect. Because if you get 30 or 40 people that need ventilators in a small hospital that is way outside of what they usually expect from a flu season or anything else, all of a sudden, now you got a capacity problem. Now you got to start moving people to other areas. And remember, whenever you're moving somebody who is suffering from COVID-19, and especially they're having trouble breathing, they clearly have the symptoms, they likely, even if they haven't been tested, know that this is what they're facing. And if you move them, you risk spreading the disease a bit. So this is where we have to start getting creative with our solutions and finding ways to make sure we do the maximum possible. We also have to note that even, we get enough ventilators in place, that's necessary, right? That gives people a fighting chance. But the ventilators are no guarantee, and the governor's been saying that too. It's not like you get on a ventilator and the fight is likely to go your way. I think the odds are certainly in the favor of a person who gets on a ventilator soon enough, based on what we've seen so far. But there's still real cause for concern with this. I mean, cause for concern is a dramatic understatement, but this is where the country is right now. We're trying to find a way to deal with this expected influx, and it is going to be, it is happening. We are at the surge. The surge is now. It is going on. It's definitely going to be going on here in New York City, where I'm broadcasting to you from, and it will be in many other places across the country. Here's something that I don't think is getting enough attention now as we consider, and this is, everyone's involved in this, so everyone is, it is incumbent upon all of us, especially where a lot of us are stuck at home. By the way, just also a shout out to truck drivers, longshoremen, UPS, Postal Service, electric utility, water utility, sanitation. I think I might have said garbage disposal, but I know that's actually something that's under your sink. But sanitation workers, people that pick up garbage and recycling for cities, for municipalities and counties, thank you for doing what you are doing. You are appreciated every single day. We are indebted to you for what you are doing. I know this is your job, and a lot of you take particular pride in doing your job at this point in time. I've been getting your messages about that, but we really do mean it. We really thank you for this. Every day out there. I know people that are scared I know people that aren't in the high risk group who are kind of scared to leave their house in New York right now. They don't want to go outside. They don't want to go outside. You can imagine going from building to building and having to take care of the city's sanitation. But of course, it's absolutely essential. I mean, what would happen if in any U.S. city, all of a sudden, we just had trash piling up everywhere? Not only would it be unsightly, it's a major health hazard at a time we're already dealing with a health crisis. So thank you all for what you're doing. And I know a lot of you listen to this show, and also doctors, nurses, first responders, police, fire. You're holding society together right now. You are carrying the American Republic right now on your shoulders in a way that, usually is left to those who are serving the military overseas, and military overseas still doing what they do. And I know there's been a surge in cases for them too. So these are the people, those who are not able to just stay at home and telecommute, which is necessary. People have to keep doing their jobs too. I'm not by any means trying to minimize that, and everyone's making sacrifices different ways. But those who are still showing up for their jobs, thank you, especially those who are doing it on the security, safety, and provision of essential resources side. You are keeping this place, you're keeping this country alive. That's also where I wanted to get to. When do we think that this becomes manageable where there's not risk? I believe that there's and this is what I've been trying to get at, and I think maybe I was a little early with some of this. People weren't ready to hear it. Doesn't mean it's not true. But there will have to come a time when we say, all right, we're going to allow more people to go out of their homes, and there will still be risk. There is no future in this year where there won't be risk, right? Unless someone develops a miracle cure, which no one thinks is going to happen, there's going to be risk leaving your home, because we're not going to eradicate this disease. In fact, most experts believe that it will come back and that it will be cyclical and that it'll be bouncing around the population. And so it'll go down. And I think the warm weather is going to be very helpful. And I will talk about some causes for optimism coming up here. But when do we think it's going to be safe to work again? There will be no point, and serious people need to understand this. There's not going to be a point at which, anytime soon, for months and months, at which you will not be accepting an increased risk to the population from this virus by going to work and engaging in more activity. And we also know that we can't just say locked into our homes for months and months and months. So this is what we need to balance out. This is what society has to tackle, what our government and all of us have to figure out right now. We got to start establishing what the baseline is for that kind of activity and what acceptable risk will be, because there is no future anytime soon in which there is no risk.